election still keeping? And the answer is, as far as we know, it is, and so Mr. Brown and his team are preparing accordingly. Am I right, Mr. Brown?
That's correct. As far as we continue to prepare until we are told otherwise.
All right. And Marinda Ruddock, again, thank you again for your question, Marinda. She's asking, God forbid, but what would be the alternative plan if there is a disaster such as a hurricane or an earthquake? I suspect you mean if it was a hurricane, at least we would have had some advance notice. But I suspect the question, or the broader question, is, do you have a contingency plan should there be some kind of, you know, disaster or emergency or something like that that happens on the day?
The ROPA, which is the act that governs the election, is very clear in terms of the basis on which elections can be postponed or aborted. And part of that, it gives them the authority to do so, that is the constituted authority, to do so in case there's a hurricane, there's earthquake, and other, I think some of there's some other factors too. So there's a provision in law for the postponement to take place.
Tamara Hibbert is asking, so we understand that the election day workers were not going to be staying overnight anywhere this election. Has this plan changed? I think you came on just a moment after, because we actually just discussed that. But for her benefit, Mr. Brown, can you just answer again what the approach that will be taken to putting some election day workers in, you know, gathering them in one area and then.
I think the person and that person is quite au fait with the process. In our past, we normally would put up a significant amount of person, but we have opted this time not to only what is required to put up those critical persons that might be coming from some remote areas, etc. So we have scaled that down, but what we have done is put in place a courier arrangement that that courier arrangement is centered around a person transporting the worker to be used in those 32 constituencies. And yes, we're still gonna put up a certain amount, but it's a scaling down of the number that we normally put up in the past.
All right, I hope that answers your question, Tamara. All right, Gillian Sawyers is asking, would election day workers be getting masks and shields?
Every worker that we're working on election day, the 31,000, certainly the presiding officers, the poll clerks, the sanitization team members, the supervisors and the reserve, every worker be given face masks, every worker be given a face shield, every worker be given access to gloves, everybody will be given access to the sanitization liquid, etc. And everybody temperature be taken, etc. on the day. So there's a significant amount of PPEs in terms of ensuring that all workers are protected.
All right, and somebody's asking, should electors appear at the polling stations without masks and say they refuse to wear these, will they be allowed to vote?
A good question, but we appeal to the electorate to understand this environment that we operate in. And it's the onus on all of us to ensure that we take whatever precaution that we need to take, given what is happening with this COVID pandemic. And part of that precaution is the wearing of a mask, and we're going to ensure and encourage persons. While constitutionally we can't prevent you from voting because you don't have a mask, we appeal to the personal side of you, given the safety aspect of it, that you wear a mask. There might be cases that we might be able to assist you with a mask if you don't have one. But bear in mind that there's 1.9 million persons on the list, and it's totally impossible for us to be able to give everybody a mask.
Okay, exactly. So, ladies and gentlemen, please travel with your own mask, preferably your own sanitizer as well, and just comply with the process to make it run smoothly. You don't want to come and create a backlog or create an issue that delays the process for other persons and creates a difficulty on the day. You don't want it to be as smoothly. You want the process to go as, I would imagine, right, Mr. Brown, you want the process to go as smoothly and easily as possible so you can mitigate any kind of risk and ensure that things just happen with as minimal impediments as possible.
Correct. And as I said before, that's the greatest assistance that we could ever get from the electorate, to cooperate with us and just abide by whatever rules and whatever the thing that we have put in place to assist the process. Despite some minor delays, that one have to understand the environment that we operate in, and therefore there are some things that we have to do to ensure that everybody is safe.
All right. So next question, Hoskins Johnny is asking again, when will the new IDs be ready? I suspect maybe that for persons who may or may not have collected their IDs yet, is there at this, well, let me ask you, let me not try and preempt any answer that you might want to give. In terms of if you don't have an ID now, can you go and get one, or what's the process that you might need to follow at this point?
If you have lost your ID, you can get one. It can be replaced, not no cost to you. If you have a current ID, that is. What he might be asking about is maybe we embarked on a renewal exercise, ID card renewal exercise earlier this year. Those cards are not yet ready. Those we anticipate will be ready before December, going to be ready after the election. And there's another group of cards that are ready. One. If you just came on the list, and as of November 31st,
in terms of that the 9 o'clock curfew wouldn't affect EOJ workers. What's the situation with that? And I guess you can discuss the opening hours of the polling stations and time mandated for by, for each voter, etc.
All right, the law is very specific as it relates to the opening hours that a polling station. It is very specific in the sense that the polling station must be open at 7 a.m., not before, and close at 5 p.m. So that time is still being maintained. For that to change, you'd have to get some amendment of the act itself. That was not done. However, it must be noted though that if anybody that is in the line at 5 p.m. must be allowed to vote. The question isn't whether or not the process will continue so that people can get to go home by the curfew time. All our election day workers won't be affected by the curfew time or curfew order. A special provision is being made that all election day workers will be treated as essential service workers, and therefore it would not impact on them. So therefore, if you're out at a certain time beyond 9 p.m., you should be allowed to go home as quick as possible without any penalty from the security forces. So that has been gazetted, and so our workers should not have a problem on the day itself.
All right, Hoskins is saying thank you for your question, Hoskins. Keep them coming if you have any more. If there's anything that you'd like to have Mr. Brown address as we continue, even though we only have a fixed amount of time here. Let me get in one of my questions, Mr. Brown. The importance of keeping your ballot
process. Marking of your ballot is done in secret, and therefore there's that secrecy element to it, and therefore.
The following is a paid announcement by the People's National Party.
What is essential for my life and yours? The PNP's pledge to you is to undertake a massive upgrade of current water channels, treatment, storage and supply networks, creating universal access to water to every home, both in urban and especially rural communities. We will allocate a monthly $1,000 credit towards all your water bills. Water gives us all dignity. We're building a Jamaica for all Jamaica.
The preceding was a paid announcement by the People's National Party.
Go towards a down payment. Once they've achieved the necessary down payment, it converts to a mortgage and they become an owner. And this allows them to private and public participation, pension funds, the capital markets, the banking sector, and of course, our catalytic agency conceptualized by Michael Manley, the National Housing Trust.
I'm coming back to you, Manny, but you didn't answer the question.
On the other one, no. We recognize, thank you. On the other issue you raised, the reality is that with people being laid off, not only in the tourism sector, though perhaps most badly affected in that sector, 300,000 workers being impacted, but more broadly as well with the contraction of the economy, there will be persons whose homes are in jeopardy because they are unable to service their mortgages. And this is really as a result of an unprecedented shock in the form of the COVID-19 epidemic. What we are saying is that we're going to ensure that regulators don't treat the usual 90-day arrears as being the yardstick for default when it comes to residential mortgages. The government will stand behind the interest accrual, so the lenders will know that that interest for a period of up to 2 years is guaranteed by the state, allow the economy to recover so persons don't lose their homes. It also protects the housing market from a mass of houses being dumped because lenders are compelled to sell. So we think this is very important as a response to COVID.
Thank you, Mark. Imani.
This is just on the point that Mark made about the rent to own and the value of that in particular to persons in the informal sector. It's huge. I mean, you think about communities in South St. Andrew and Central Kingston, in rural Jamaica, where persons are not earning a formal job. It's a chance for them to actually own their own home in a practical way and just feel that pride. And when I see many women across my own constituency, you know, who are working very hard, very, very hard, I know that that particular solution will suit them very well in establishing a base for their families. But on that last point that Mark made as well, in terms of the investing in a productive way to get the economy turned back around, the last point on technology, Lisa, I want to speak to is about our investments in technology parks. Because you don't only want to just have community centers being enabled to facilitate individual entrepreneurship at the micro level,
right,
or the children coming out of primary schools being supported, but you also want to boost innovation across the economy. We are going to grow ourselves out of this crisis, not contract and pull back, but support people in terms of their health, but also boost the economy in the right ways.
Because we're the People's National Party.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Now, the wealth plan, and certainly our People's Pledge, puts people at the center of Jamaica's development because we are the People's National Party. We've always been that party that has been interested in the matters of people because we care. And what Imani Mark and Dr. Phillips and Damon have been speaking about is a concept of making sure that we stimulate ourselves out of this crisis. So when you heard about that rentals, so each year we'll be spending $750 million out of the discretionary spending to make sure that that cohort is taken care of and that the society is built with them in mind. Youth is also wealth, because we will establish $4 billion worth of an investment fund for youth first job initiative.
a substantial investment in that type of human development. So essentially, obviously the ideas of making the force as efficient, home ownership more affordable for them, and increasing the insurance cover that they have, especially if they're killed in the line of duty, and all those things that really make the society reflect well in terms of how they regard the persons who stand between us and violent crime. That is part of the policy, but it's really a more people-centered approach.
And I also, before I touch on the other two, I also know that we will be having a serious injection in terms of a stimulation package for young people who are at risk to steer them away from crime, and also rehabilitation mechanisms for those persons who have come out of jail perhaps so that they don't re-enter the system. Take me now to COVID-19 and what you believe is the best thing out of this wealth plan to take us out of this fog.
It's a collection of measures. It's not one particular thing. I think the focusing on affordable housing to stimulate the economy and to provide ownership is very critical. The land reform and titling reform ties in with that. The grants to allow persons who are living in dilapidated housing conditions to self-improve their own housing stock, tied with the titling program that we'll have. This will enable their quality of life to increase significantly, and the wealth of their family also to increase. We have programs for empowering entrepreneurs in the MSME sector, the micro, small, and medium-sized sector, with grants to enable them to get their businesses going. To sustainability, we have tools for artisans. You know, we have a $50,000 tool for any tool grant for any certified artisan to help them to step up their productivity. All of these things are really looking at how we get the informal sector formalized and how we get the entrepreneurial spirit of our people to be generating wealth for the society as a whole.
And corruption?
Corruption, we conceptualized and implemented MOCA, the Major Organized Crime Agency. That was a PNP initiative. The Integrity Commission with prosecutorial powers was a PNP initiative. We tabled the legislation. The JLP eventually passed it. We need those agencies to be functioning properly. They need to be empowered and encouraged to do their work. They have the necessary legislative powers now. There may be some tweaks that will be necessary, and we will do those. But we want to see accountability in public life, and that is critical to us because we know that corruption, which is essentially thieving, is like a cancer eating away at the state, at the body politic, at the democracy, and at the society that we have. So we take that very seriously. I wanted to say one thing on the disabled community. You touched on it. My father dedicated his life to uplifting disabled people in this country, and I grew up in a household that was focused in that way. I have spent many hours at the Sir John Golding Rehab Center. It was then called Mona Rehab, just seeing how they operate, and since his passing, I've tried my best to keep it going. The Disabilities Act, that we passed in 2014, was a fundamental piece of legislation for empowering disabled people. Jamaica was the first country to sign on to the Disabilities Convention. Floyd Morris, who was then a junior minister, was critical in pushing that. The disabilities legislation, which was passed, is not yet in effect, and it's a travesty. We intend to bring it into effect, and we intend to support access for the disabled through spending at least $750 million of the capital budget a year to making buildings accessible across Jamaica. We're going to continue that until we have an accessible society.
And sign language, teaching sign language in schools.
That's all part of it, so that people become trilingual, Jamaican, English first, Jamaican, and sign.
Exactly.
Finally, the Human Rights Institute.
Yeah. When I was Minister of Justice, I attended a law ministers conference in Gaborone in Botswana. And I was introduced there to the concept of a national human rights institution that really focuses on ensuring that your human rights performance of your society is at a level that's consistent with civilized norms. The Commonwealth supported the development of the proposals for bringing such an institution here. And the model that we chose, which was the one recommended for small countries like ours, is a hybrid model. And we looked at the public defender, the Office of the Public Defender, to expand the mandate of that office rather than create a new institution with a cost attendant on that. Build out the Office of the Public Defender so it becomes a national human rights institution. We did consultations, we got feedback in the design, and Cabinet approved it. Since this government came into power, they said they were going to do it, but they have done nothing about it. We intend to revive that because we regard human rights as essential. So the young people of this country want to know that their rights are protected. They want to know that we are a tolerant society that believes in the essential humanity of the individual and protects those rights. And that institution will be an important institution foundation to establish.
Build it up. We are build Jamaica for me and you.
Announcement by the People's National Party.
Building your Kingston, building Clarendon, building your Central, Portland to Westmoreland, building your St. Bess, building St. Catherine, yes, St. Mary now get left, and over to the west, building up St. James, St. Thomas have the wave, building Manchester name, Trelawney we are clear.
The proceeding was a paid announcement by the People's National Party.
Of the PNP. Our pledge is to ensure that all students and teachers have access to adequate technology infrastructure. The rapid infusion of technology into the teaching and learning process will ensure that no child gets left behind. Let's build an education system for